we're going to have one of our favorite contributors who's been on a few of our global mining symposiums as a panelist and presenting for Commerce Resources. We have Chris Grove. I believe, Chris, are you here with us now?
Tony, I'm here.
Great. Always great to see you. How are you doing today, Chris?
You're doing just fine. Great to see you, Tony. Looking lean and mean. Look at that COVID fitness regime you're obviously on, doing weight training, a lot of cardio. Looks good.
The master of irony, Chris Grove. Yeah. I'm doing a lot of weight training with my submarine sandwiches. You know, that's the Italian diet and no exercise during COVID. I don't know if my doctor's too happy with that combination, but anyway, I'm jolly, Chris. I'm jolly. That's what matters. Listen, Chris, let me introduce you, and then we'll jump in a little bit to the overall market. Some interesting developments with Cheetah up in Northwest Territories. Want to get your take on that, and then we'll do a deeper dive on what's going on with commerce. So let me introduce Chris so everyone can get to know him. Chris has served as president of Commerce since 2014. Previous to that, he worked as corporate communications for the company. He's a noted expert on rare earths, on the rare earths market, has significant contacts within the financial communities in North America and all across Europe. And as I've mentioned, he's been one of our go-to experts on this space over the years. It's always great to have him join us. You know, and one of the things, Chris, I think, you know, we've mentioned on the show before, you and I first met on a European investment tour back about 7 years ago. And many of the things, what impressed me so much was not only your profound knowledge of the space, but many of the things you were saying then come to fruition, right? It's always impressive. A lot of people are talking in our industry, but the ones that talk and then it starts happening, you're kind of like, all right, that person knew what they were talking about. So we're seeing a lot of what you were saying back then come to bear now. In the news, it even made CBC, for crying out loud. Cheetah Resources getting their project up in Nachalacho. I'm probably saying that wrong, but getting it into production. What does that mean for the industry? Does that is this a big milestone?
Well, the thing is, and yes, the CBC did pick up that story, and you know, Cheetah and Vital were permitted to extract a large bulk sample, 600,000 tons, which is a lot of material, and so that is great. Ultimately, as an Australian company with a project in Canada, there are still a few steps they need to go through. So on the macros, you know, one of the best analysts on the rare earth elements is Adamus Intelligence, really good guy. I hope you know him, Ryan Castieu. Based out of Sudbury, and you know, he and other analysts have suggested that the world needs, you know, 4 or 5 new producers of the size of what Linus or MP Materials right now is producing, which is around 40 to 50,000 tons per annum by the end of this decade. So the current situation is globally a significantly increased demand against major issues on the supply side. So you know, the market basically will absorb whatever is brought to market.
Very good, very good. And what are we seeing here on this whole dynamic? Obviously, the Chinese dominating the market so much. I mean, with geopolitical tensions where they are, I mean, this is one of the things you flagged many years ago. Give us an update on that whole dynamic, on how the Western world is the Western world reacting with as much urgency as they need to? Have they finally got the message? Give us the breakdown there.
Well, you know, I was very happy to see the amount of capital directed towards critical minerals advancement in the most recent federal budget, which is about $3.5 billion in total. Synchronistically, I was in Montreal 2 weeks ago, meetings with one of our shareholders in Investissement Quebec, and meeting with the new mining analyst at La Caisse de Depot, which is great to have La Caisse back looking at resources, which they hadn't been looking at for about a decade. But, you know, they took a good decade out of resources, being, you know, like 2011 to 2021. You know, that was a terribly difficult decade for resources. But at any rate, as I was waiting for my flight back to Vancouver, I had a chance encounter with the Minister of Natural Resources, Jonathan Wilkinson, who happens to be the candidate in my riding of North Vancouver. And as I told him, I voted for you twice, and I thought you did a good job with the DFO. And arguably, we have the best rare earth element project in Canada. Here's my card. And he gave me his AIDS card. And I said to him, we really look forward to understanding, how the federal government is going to deploy this $3.5 billion towards the advancement of critical minerals projects in Canada. And to be very clear as well, our byproduct at the Ashram deposit is also fluorspar, and fluorspar is also a critical minerals. It was added to the list, I think, about a year ago, thereabouts. Now, back to answer your question more directly, the reality is that China became a net importer of rare earth elements in sometime in 2018, and probably a net importer of fluorspar sometime in 2017. So both commodities have been very significantly affected by that very fundamental, significant change in China's position. China still has the largest market for rare earth elements downstream, and China still is the largest single producer. But as I say, China is a net importer, and China is importing material from North Korea, Vietnam, Myanmar, Australia being Lynas, and the United States being Mountain Pass. In terms of China having that very significant change, I will give credit to Beijing in so much as Beijing has been very active, relatively quietly, I think, to the West, in terms of shutting down the most egregious polluters in terms of the extractive industries and the processing. So for a very specific example, somewhere around 20% of the supply of global rare earth elements had been historically coming from the ionic clays in the South China area. The South China ionic clays, the biggest producers of heavy rare earth elements historically. Well, that basically is heap leaching with acid. Now, China, or Beijing, basically has shut down all of those projects, and there really is negligible amount of production from these heap leached sites in the south of China. However, right across the negligible border with Myanmar, those activities are going on at full steam. And so China may not be the best global citizen because they're buying much more acid heap leached rare earth elements from Myanmar across what is a negligible border. So at any rate, that balance of production has shifted very fundamentally. In terms of answering your question again, the politicians, the governments of the West, yes, they are saying the right things. Capital is arguably being deployed, certainly in the European Union. The European Union had a fund called Horizon 2020, and very notably and admirably, they granted the only non-Chinese commercially significant metallization facility on planet Earth, which is the UK-based company called Less Common Metals. Less Common Metals received a grant of 18 million euros in 2018 to become the first metallization facility, and they achieved that a couple of years ago. I was speaking to the CEO of Less Common about a month ago, and way back in 2018, he literally ran out into the lobby of a hotel in Hong Kong where we were all attending this International Rare Earth Element Conference, and he asked me to have a meeting with them because he had just received this loan, and it essentially came with the caveat that he be only using non-Chinese material as his input feedstock. And so he requested a sample from us. And so, in the presentation I'll do at some point here, you will see Less Common Metals on the list of requesters, industry requesters. The bottom line is that Less Common Metals has achieved something that nobody else really outside of China has achieved, which is metallization. And so they are a very, very important, they play a very important role for anybody that wants to be a magnet manufacturer outside of China. So in terms of what I'm really trying to say is that, yes, governments are saying the right things. Some governments have deployed capital. For example, MP Materials, who have the highest market cap in the rare earth element sector right now, trading at about $38 a share, market cap somewhere north of $6 billion. They received in March $35 million from the US Department of Defense to process heavy rare earth elements. And so that's great. These grants, loans, etc., that, from the Japanese government that allowed Lynas to get into production way back in 2011, 2012, these are great. But I would say, generally speaking, the industry is really more focused, or has been much more active than I think a lot of people understand. And so that's what I want to say. The people who want to make products based upon rare earth elements or rare earth element magnets, those people arguably know each other very well. We've had sample requests from over 24 international majors, all who want to reduce or completely eliminate their dependency on China for supplies of rare earth elements. So I am very much looking forward to the next quarter, the next couple of years, as we continue to advance our project in Nunavik in northern Quebec.
Excellent. Well, we're gonna very soon get into that. On these, so really interesting points about less common metals and that metallization facility. Is there any other currently ones outside of government speak? We all know they speak well, but is there any other capital committed to developing a downstream facility in the Western world, i.e. Europe, North America?
Well, right now, there's also a new group out of the European Union called the European Raw Materials Alliance. And for now on, let's just call them by their acronym IRMA. And IRMA has something like a gargantuan amount of money. I could be wrong, but it's, I think, $200 billion or something put forward. And I wish I remembered more about it, but I do remember clearly going through the exercise of filling out all the forms to be an applicant to IRMA, to then be told after about a week of work that IRMA can't invest directly into a Canadian company. And so that was a bit of a cold shower there. However, if, say, Commerce Resources wanted to partner with someone in the European Union, which arguably is not less common, as attractive as they would be, because of course they're in Britain, that would be very attractive. To be very clear, the Calgary-based company Macango, I believe, is working on with a Polish company to build a rare earth element processing facility in Poland. People may want to check on that, but I believe that's the case right now. In Canada, in the United States, there have been grants made. And certainly in terms of the federal government, something that probably most people don't know is that the federal government has been financing a rare earth element optimization program run by under the aegis of Natural Resources Canada, NRCan, operated by CanMet Mining. And we have been a very significant beneficiary of this program for the last 3 years. And it received a much increased budget back in September of last year, before the federal election, of $58 million in total. And again, we will be a significant beneficiary of this optimization program. Let me be very clear, even with a project like the Ashram, which arguably has the most attractive of the most standard commercialized fundamentals for rare earth elements, still, there is so many opportunities for optimization. And so to be really clear, we benefit from this ongoing federally funded work and also the provincially funded work financed by Quebec.
Yeah, well, it's a great province to be working in. We're going to be doing, make sure after your presentation you stick around, because our thought leadership panel discussion to end off the day is squarely focused on Quebec. And we'll get your opinions at the end as well on what it's like doing business there. So let's focus more on commerce now. You have one of the largest rare earth fluorspar deposits of its kind in the world. You have the stated ambitious goal of becoming one of the lowest cost rare earth producers again in the world. So let's see what you got here, Chris. Are you ready to present and to edify us a little bit more on what's going on there?
I am. And let me know if you can see that, Tony.
We can
Uh,
indeed. Looking good.
I'm going to go to full screen if I can figure that out. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you very much, Tony. It's a pleasure to present to you today and all of the listeners here on the Northern Miner. Tony and the Northern Miner, let me just say, do a great job. They really understand the industry. It was a super pleasure to meet Tony on our Zim2 Capital bus tour, European bus tour 6 or 7 years ago. I can't remember, hitting, I believe, Frankfurt, Munich, Zurich, and Geneva. And it's just a pleasure to be here today. And I'm very happy to present to you the Ashram rare earth element and fluorspar deposit in Quebec, Canada. Ultimately, we're happy to see a little increase of the share price recently. And we did see this recent high back at the beginning of April, following arguably what was an extremely significant news release for us, and I'll get to that shortly. Zim2 Capital is the company that created Commerce Resources as an IPO in August 2001. I've been a shareholder since 1999. And after the company went public, the share price doubled very quickly, more than doubled, and then 9/11 happened. So we went into the dark days for about 5 years, and then I started working here in 2004. The government of Quebec, through a direct investment from Investissement Quebec, is a shareholder, as is EDE Asset Management out of Toronto, led by one of the most knowledgeable fund managers in Canada on rare earth elements, Chi Guo. Anyways, moving ahead, this is some of the board. And in terms of our Smith team over here on the right-hand side, Darren Smith is our project manager, and his wife, Murray Smith, is our social and environmental sustainability manager. We have always applied the highest and best corporate practices in terms of the environment and social issues. And for this, we were awarded actually by the Quebec Mining Association, the E3 Plus Award back in 2015, due to the very good work done by Murray and Darren. There, look at that handsome man, Nikola Tesla. Look at that mustache. As he said about 100 years ago, 1,000 years hence, the telephone and the motion picture camera may be obsolete, but the principle of the rotating magnetic field will remain a vital living thing for all time to come. At one of the many rare earth element conferences we've been to, there was a great video by somebody from Stanley Black & Decker, and they were showing a cross-section view of an electric motor. Could have been an electric motor for an electric chainsaw, which I own, a weed whacker, whatever, a leaf blower. And ultimately, it is a little bit of electric charge then initiating this momentum of these rare earth element magnets chasing each other, which is absolutely amazing. And if you go to the washroom and you're drying your hands with an Dyson air dryer, you will understand that power that rare earth element magnets chasing each other have. As I said earlier to Tony, we're very interested to find out how the federal government is going to be deploying this $3.5 billion for critical minerals projects. And of course, we're very happy that Fluorspar also got added onto that list. We also have some very high-grade niobium proximal to the Ashram deposit in Quebec. And we also have a significant defined resource of tantalum and niobium here in British Columbia. And all of those commodities, everything I just mentioned, is on the Canadian critical minerals list. This chart here from early in this year, showing the just exponential growth of sales of electric vehicles, is, I hope, very compelling. Basically, as the world transitions to a lower dependency on fossil fuels, although you can't really see that now, what with the share price of Suncor and the price of gas at the pumps, but this is a very significant narrative that the world is currently engaged in. Ultimately, as I said earlier, the global demand for rare earth elements has more than doubled in the last 10 years. And in the last 20 years, there's only one new producer, which is Lynas out of Australia. And they received a loan that now totals $400 million from the Japanese. Mountain Pass in California, of course, is a reboot, and they are doing everything right, in my humble opinion. We also all expect that demand will continue to increase. This chart here is from arguably what is also the best rare earth element price report that you can buy for cheap, which is only about $1,500 US per annum. And that's Buy Info out of Beijing, run by a woman named Jerry Bai. At any rate, I also find this a very compelling chart. I don't know why they put it on a black background, but still, if you can see the cobalt blue and the prices here at the end of 2021, they would be up about here right now. And as you can see, they're actually approaching prices I thought that we would never see again, which were hit after China cut off all supply to the Japanese in September of 2010. So this price appreciation to me is very logical in terms of increased demand against major issues on the supply side. This is a chart from another analyst showing the expected supply gap that will be developing. Arguably, I think this chart is very conservative right now. Very quickly, to go over a few facts about rare earth elements, rare earth element mining is not intrinsically more harmful to the environment than mining any other commodity. There are some very, very lazy journalists out there who have made this point, and they are basing that opinion on historical and accurate, but historical extractive and processing methods that were operated, especially in China, and which are still operated in Myanmar, as I did say. But there's no way that kind of operation would ever get permitted in North America. And in fact, the Canadian National Instrument 43101 is the most stringent and the most demanding mining legislation on the planet. We have such strict criteria for water and soil quality. And for the Ashram project, the environmental baseline data collection is well underway. And in general, rare earth element mines are not iron ore mines. Rare earth element mines are generally smaller, higher value, with smaller tailings facilities. In terms of the current horrible war that is going on, yes, ultimately this is a major hit, real and perceived to everyone's psyche in terms of the importance of securing your supply lines. Russia produces less than 10% of the global supplies of rare earth elements, but basically all of that production goes to the Canadian company Neo Performance Materials from the company called Solikamsk. So arguably, new sources of feedstock are required. As we like to say, as my wife says, who drives electric vehicles? Rare earth elements drive electric vehicles. Ultimately, in the rare earth element sector, as we like to say, all roads lead to monazite. Monazite is the industry preferred mineral to extract rare earth elements from commercially due to its high neodymium and praseodymium content compared to other commercialized and processed ores being bastnasite and xenotime. Finally, as we like to say, all roads lead to the Ashram rare earth element fluorspar deposit, which is the largest monazite dominant defined resource of rare earth elements in North America, and actually the largest monazite dominant defined resource of rare earth elements hosted in a carbonatite on planet Earth. I'll let that sink in for a second. There is a larger deposit in Africa, but it is actually in a laterite. Yes, Rocky Balboa at the top of the Philadelphia Library, I believe, stairs. And the reason this slide is here is because of this production of a commercially marketable mixed rare earth carbonate, which we originally produced a very small sample of in March. And then we produced 55 more grams of this material in April. And currently we are working on producing 2.5 kilos of this material at our pilot plant at Hazen Research in Golden, Colorado, for delivery to industry third-party requests. The Ashram is in Nunavik, and Nunavik is under the James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement and the Northeastern Quebec Agreement. And these two agreements are the most streamlined mechanisms, arguably, for the advancement of a mineral project in North America. So Quebec, which is often on the Fraser's list as one of the top mining jurisdictions in the world, arguably, I would suggest that Nunavik is even better than the rest of Quebec. We're very happy, as I mentioned earlier, to have the government of Quebec as a shareholder through a direct investment in 2017. And just to be very clear, this highlighted orange road for the Stornoway Hall Road, that was suggested that we highlight that by the fund manager from Investissement Quebec when I was in a meeting with him in New York, and he said, we're the government of Quebec, we're the biggest shareholder of Stornoway, and we built them a 200-kilometer long road. This is Commerce Resources. We put $1 million into them, and we're going to build them a 180-kilometer road from the Ashram up the east coast here of Kuujjuaq on Ungava Bay. So we are certainly looking forward if that becomes a reality. The second part, the building of the road. Just very quickly, some fundamentals. Rare earth elements are the most complicated commodity. Yes, they are very present in the Earth's crust, but most of those showings are hosted by minerals that no one knows how to economically process. So out of the 150 different rare earth element minerals that exist, there are only 4 that are commercialized today, and there are only 4 that have ever been commercialized. They are dominated by monazite, bastnasite, and xenotime, and loperite is the one that accounts for less than 10% of the global rare earth element production, and that's the one found in Russia. Ultimately, only monazite, bastnasite, and xenotime mineralogies are able to produce high-grade mineral concentrates. And the host rock type for over 80% of global production is the carbonatite. As you may remember, the Ashram deposit is the largest monazite-dominant carbonatite on planet Earth. This is a list of current producers, and you can see that Linus actually is a weathered carbonatite, which means it is called a laterite. But they were successful in solving whatever issues they had with the laterite by the investment of $260 million from the Japanese in 2011. In terms of a direct comparison, the Ashram project compares most favorably to the world's largest rare earth element producer, which is the Bayan deposit in China. We are both carbonatite host rock deposits. We are both dominated by the mineral monazite with a secondary in bastnasite. And then Commerce actually has a little bit, as we like to say, of spice of the xenotime mineralogy, which increases our heavy rare earth element distribution. Finally, in terms of the final bullet point here, we have a higher percentage of the magnet feed, neodymium, praseodymium, than does Bayan Obo. This is a current geological model of the resource. Carbonatites typically come up in swarms or families, and they can come up in small, not veins exactly, but they can come up in small showings, whereas ideally what you want is a huge honking blob, and this is exactly what the Ashram is. It is a huge honking blob, which has a slight difference in distribution between the A zone and the B zone. And the A zone has a slight increase of that magnet feed material. The current resources is just a hair under 250 million tons in total, being a measured resource at 1.6 million tons, indicated resource at 28 million tons, and an inferred resource at 220 million tons. We have added to this resource over 13,000 meters of drilling, and the new resource will come out in the pre-feasibility study, ideally in Q1 of next year. As I said earlier, the Ashram has one of the highest percentages of the 4 rare earth elements that are essential to the manufacture of permanent magnets. Here you can see in the A zone, we have 24.7% of these 4 rare earth elements, and ultimately, Bayan Obo has 21.9%, Linus has 23.6%, and MP Materials has 16%. This means essentially that more of the rare earth elements that are of the highest value are found at the Ashram. Ultimately, these are the economic metrics from the preliminary economic assessment we calculated pre-tax and released in May of 2012. Yes, the $2.3 billion NPV is pre-tax and the 44% internal rate of return is pre-tax. Of course, we will be calculating the pre-fees post-tax. Ultimately, This document was completed without any mention of byproducts, and that will be included in the pre-feasibility study. Here's some bullet points of what was included in the PEA, and then a list of some of the optimizations we've achieved in the last 10 years for the pre-feas. And certainly one of the most notable things is our ability to produce better than 40% concentrates, and also the addition of the fluorspar byproduct, which will be added. Ultimately, in terms of the prices that we used in the PEA in 2012, we used $59 for praseodymium, $60 for neodymium, $764 for terbium. And now look at the current prices from the Buy Info price deck of this week. So you can see that both Praseo and Neo have better than doubled, and actually terbium is almost at a triple. Ultimately, yes, if you notice that the laggard on this chart is dysprosium, that speaks to another difference in recipe in the last decade, which is a lower percentage amount of dysprosium, and that percentage that dysprosium typically took has been taken up by these other three rare earth elements, and that's why their prices have appreciated so significantly. Ultimately, the Ashram is broken down into the actual mine site, the North Project, and then we will be barging our material, which is our plan, down to a southern location, which is still to be confirmed, determined, and ultimately that's where we will do some hydrometallurgical processing to then take to market at a minimum a rare earth element carbonate concentrate that has the low level of radioactive elements stripped out so that we can sell it to anyone on planet Earth and ship it to anyone on planet Earth. Ultimately, this is the current flow sheet for the project. I would like to point out at the magnetic separation, wet high intensity magnetic separation, or WHIMS, we would produce a 45 to 50% rare earth element concentrate, and at the same time produce a better than 80% fluorspar concentrate, which is arguably saleable to aluminum smelters such as Rio Tinto or steel producers as a flex in the production of either aluminum or steel. This is where most of our metallurgical work is ongoing. This is part of our pilot plant here. This is Nick Hazen, the president of Hazen Research. They are industry leaders, especially in rare earth elements. We are very pleased with the work that Nick and his crew have been doing for us and continue to do for us. We have a weekly call on Wednesday at 12:30. We had it yesterday, and we're very impressed by the ongoing work of optimization, and we are looking forward to the production of the 2.5 kilos of the 50% rare earth carbonate that then we will ship out to the industry majors who have requested this material. This is a partial list of the companies that have requested samples from us. I'm certainly happy to talk more about any of them. Many of these have requested different samples. The processors would want exactly what we have just produced. The other companies would be interested potentially in separated oxides, and we are looking at partial separation, especially looking at producing what would be the ideal input feedstock for the only significant commercial metallization facility out of China, which again is less common metals in the UK, and that would be neodymium praseodymium oxide, or NdPr oxide. Ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, we received the E3+ award from the Quebec Mining Association for excellence in terms of the environment and the social issues, the social responsibility in our attempt to get the social license to operate. And this is Frank Mariage, who was the president of the Mining Association at that time. We're very happy to have a signed letter of intent between the dominant social group in Nunavik, which are the Inuit, and their two corporations representing the Inuit being the Makivik and the Nayumavik Land Holding Corporation. And our last meeting with the Makivik and the Nayumavik took place in Kuujjuaq 2 weeks ago on May 15th. We will continue sorry, that was on May 10th, 2022. Sorry, I misread my own slide. I apologize. Anyways, May 10th, we were in Kuujjuaq, same day that the Governor General was visiting Kuujjuaq, where she is from. And although we didn't actually see her, but at any rate, we're very happy with the relationship we have with the Inuit. And I should also mention that the other significant social group in Nunavut are the Naskapi of Kawawa-Chikamak, just north of Shefferville. And while we were in Montreal on the way back, we also had a meeting with the new chief of the Naskapi Nation. Ultimately, we have so much work going on for the pre-feasibility study, and all of these groups are playing their part in working on different aspects of the pre-feasibility study. As I say, well, as I may have said earlier, we had hoped to have the pre-feas out in Q3 or Q4 of this year, but everyone in this industry is suffering from a significant backlog at the assay labs. And this is something that is delaying the delivery of the pre-feasibility study. But we're working as fast and as diligently as possible on this, and we'll get it out as soon as possible. But let me say this while we're on this slide, that arguably this is the most appropriate time for an industry partner to actually get a seat at the table in terms of having some input into detailing the economics of what we will produce and can produce for the next several generations. So as I say, this is the most appropriate time in the next quarter thereabouts to secure an industry partner. Ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, we are a very significant beneficiary of these provincially and federally funded optimization programs. And here we are, the final slide. So to sum up, the Ashram rare earth element fluorspar deposit is the most attractive type of the commercially viable rare earth element deposits that are in production today, which is a monazite dominant carbonatite. We have produced high-grade mineral concentrates. We have produced a commercially marketable mixed rare earth carbonate, which has over 21% NdPr, which we can sell or ship to anyone on planet Earth. We're in a great jurisdiction, Nunavut, Quebec. We have a huge resource. At the current production scenario, which we've increased, or we're looking at increasing by 50% to 6,000 tons of extraction per day, which works out to 2.1 million tons per annum. And with a resource of 249 million tons in total collectively, that gives us well over 100 years of potential production. Anyways, we have released a positive preliminary economic assessment a decade ago at much lower input commodity prices, and we are working on the pre-feas as quickly and diligently as possible. Ultimately, thank you, Tony and Laura, for the opportunity to present to you today. Again, it's been a pleasure.
Excellent, Chris. Fantastic presentation, as always. The depth of knowledge really shines through, and yeah, this is something to get excited about. What one thing that pops to mind when you showed that very positive price chart, where that we're kind of getting back into this upswing here, and that demand is really strong. An issue that always comes up in this industry when we see strong prices. What about substitution? Is there substitutes that could come in if prices get too high?
Well, you know, that is a consideration, no question about it. But, you know, and Konstantin Karyanopoulos, the CEO of Neo Performance Materials, who are also doing all of the right things, in my humble opinion, he is often saying that as kind of a shot across the bow to the rare earth element raw material producers globally. But I would mention that a very significant difference between the rare earth elements and the battery metals is, on the one hand, the battery metal space. Yes, we're currently seeing, you know, a dominance of the lithium ion battery, but ultimately there are so many different designs for the lithium ion battery. And our personal favorite is the Toshiba Sojitz titanium niobium lithium ion battery, which has much more niobium and titanium in it, and also can be recharged completely in 6 minutes, which is amazing. But back to the rare earth elements. When the rare earth element prices went absolutely to the moon after the Senkaku boat incident, then planet Earth went into this hardball R&D drive to find substitutes. And over 6 years, no substitutes for magnet manufacturing were found. So kind of a little bit, I want to say that ship has sailed. In terms of one of the other significant markets for rare earth elements in 2010, that was for phosphors or lighting. And substitutes were found, or at least at the prices rare earth elements were at, they became not important to the production of lights. But in terms of magnets, nobody ever found a decent substitute. Yes, there are other technologies out there that believe they may be able to substitute for rare earth elements at some point in time. But I have seen nothing that is actually commercial that compares with rare earth element permanent magnets at this point.
Okay. All right, Chris, we're going to have to leave it there. We are up against the clock. Thank you again for joining us and updating us. It's great to have you. We look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Will you be in Toronto for the PDAC? Can our viewers that are in Toronto meet with you there?
I will be there at a minimum virtually. I'm not sure if due to domestic issues that is going to work out, but I certainly look forward to seeing you if I am there. Thank you very much, Tony.
Awesome. All right, Chris, you take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.